Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Um, drop drop in the chat where you're logging in from and give us some time while we let everyone else stream in. Use the chat. Good to see y'all. It's a beautiful day here in Minneapolis, where I'm calling in from. A little cloudy, but I'm seeing some sun peek through. It's kind of gorgeous out. I love the fall here. Let me know where you all are. Seeing a bunch of chats coming in and a few other Minnesotans. Awesome, good to see you. Lots of friends. Welcome. Good to see y'all. And I even see my alma mater high school, St. Croix Lutheran Academy. Good to see you, Dennis. Fantastic. We'll give it just another minute or so before we get started. Oh, and Carmen too. Hey, Carmen. See you at the homecoming game Friday. All right. Again, we're just giving one more, like 30 seconds or so. It's starting to slow down a little bit. Okay, I think I'm just going to get right started. We're going to jump in and I'll introduce myself in a second. Thanks for coming to Becoming a Fundraising Leader from Performance to Purpose. We're going to do this in a standard webinar format. You've been through the drill. If you have questions, drop in the Q&A. I'll try to get to at least a couple at the end. I put a lot of content in, so I might be fire hosing at you a bit. So bear with me, but hopefully there's a lot of content that you like. We'll also send an email out with the recording so you can play it slower. Or hey, if you're like some people, we can even speed it up maybe. I think that's possible. I don't know. But thank you for being here. So again, question in the Q&A. I've got a good friend Lauren from BWF Events. She's monitoring the chat, so if you have some technical questions or other things, she can help you out. And let's do it. Let's dive in. All right, I'm going to start by talking about what so many people bring up. You hear so many people say um, uh, the history of leaders are just they keep promoting the best fundraiser in the room. And certainly that's not new to our profession. You hear that in companies, the top sellers become the leaders. And you pair that as a subset of the Peter principle, which is people tend to be promoted to a level beyond their competence or to achieve incompetence, if I've heard it phrased lots of ways. And it's kind of a question. Is it true that the best sellers are not the best leaders? Is this a true thing? Well, there actually was a study about this. And the study was done by the National Bureau of Economic Research way back in 2018, so not that long ago, about 7 years ago. And they were trying to decide and figure out, is there truth to this old adage? And what they did is they looked at people that had been promoting after being really top sellers, and then they had these different increments when they divided up the sales performance, and they looked at people who by um, by their past, like what the probability of becoming a leader was. And they found that their chances of promotion actually increased by about 14% each time they doubled their sales. So if I doubled my sales this year from last year, I had a 14% probability of being promoted to the next leadership role. So again, the past performance was very predictive of them being promoted. And they further elaborated that companies would prioritize that their current job performance and selling was really more important in you being promoted than whether you actually had the skill sets of the job they're promoting you to. So past performance over capabilities aligned to the next job. And what they found was, sure enough, there was truth to the Peter principle that these sales workers who had a record year the year before and then were promoted the teams that they went on to manage actually decreased in their sales. The sales declined an average of 7.5% when they were led by managers who had a doubling in sales the year before. It's sort of like the old Wayne Gretzky, one of the best hockey players, if not probably the best hockey player ever lived, not a great coach. How would the best hockey player not be the best coach of a hockey team? I don't know. Maybe those are divisive words for some of you, but I think it warrants the discussion. But what was interesting in their analysis is that they did find a category of manager where when they became manager, that the sales increase. And what this was is they measured um, this category that they call collaboration. And the way they quantified it was by colleagues with whom that they would share credit. So this person often shared credit with other people on sales. They were frequent sharers of credit. When frequent sharers or collaborators became leaders, they actually had an increase in sales of about 30%. So they actually did find there was a category that grew that. And now I'm making this leap that also applies to giving into fundraising, which is technically selling significance, selling happiness through philanthropic giving, through meaning, purpose, and so forth. And we've seen in other data we've done at BWF, as well as data others have done. There's this wonderful American Marketing Association study back in 2015 that showed that collaboration actually is better for donors too. Basically, their study found that the more people that the donor met and was exposed to at the nonprofit, their volume, their subsequent nature, and the timing of their giving would increase, improve, as well as be more resilient to negative downturns. So I actually found if I knew more fundraisers, I'm going to be a better donor, as well as if I'm willing to share credit, I'm more likely to be a better leader. We saw collaboration both from the donor perspective and the seller, which I'm imputing as applying to a fundraiser as well. The specific study's not been done. However, we've seen some similar studies. Sarah Gledhill on psychological safety and competition out of the UK was an interesting study. There's other factors that are around the periphery of this discussion. And what we found is, all right, so what are these collaborative leaders? What do they do that makes them more successful? And there was an article in Forbes back in 2013, and they quantified these collaborative leaders as people that value all the levels of employees, not just the senior members, that they provide meaningful feedback regularly, that they respect people, employees as individuals. Like maybe these are common sense things. They invest in training for their teams and themselves. They're actually genuine in providing support. They offer praise and recognition. I remember a wonderful study by Dan Ariely outlined in Payoff, where they actually, in a small scale study, found higher performance from getting a note of encouragement from the CEO saying, I see what you did there. That meant a lot to me, even more so than financial bonus. Now, whether that holds up in the long term, different question, but they found how powerful recognition was and acknowledgement, and that those leaders walk the talk. So, all right, I'm jumping into a question, kind of a story and a premise, but you're like, all right, you didn't even introduce yourself. Why am I hearing about moving into leadership, moving into a different stage of career from me? I'll just give you kind of my quick background. Josh Birkholz, I'm the current CEO of BWF, organization I care deeply about. I just find it just amazing to work with this group of people that are truly mission driven, that are really trying to be accelerators in the philanthropic space. I just get joy every day from the people here that I learned so much about. Been here 21 years. I've also served on several corporate boards as well as nonprofit boards and been involved in hiring leadership roles. I'd say myself, I'm not sure I ever chased being a CEO, but becoming a CEO sort of happened to me. But I did chase impact, and I think that followed. So I don't know if I'm the most qualified, but I'm going to try to give you a survey of some different inputs so that you can evaluate, and maybe it starts you on a path to dig in. But before I do so, I'd love to get a poll of the attendees, because I know from the description, some of you are like, I want to watch this to think about how can I advance in my own leadership role, or maybe I'm already a leader and I want to be a better leader, or maybe I'm not a leader on paper and I don't desire to be, but how can I be a more leader from my current role? If you'd kind of weigh in on this, it just helps me to know where to kind of steer and put more emphasis. We'll give it, we're about half of the attendees have voted, so we'll give it a couple more minutes. Well, minutes. That's a exaggeration. We'll give it a few more seconds. We're about 80% in. All right, I think we're getting pretty close, down to a trickle. If your vote's not in and we're about to close it, I apologize, but I think we have the basic trend. If Lauren, you want to kind of share the results here. All right. I believe it's showing. If not, I apologize, but I'll say it to you right now. It looks like about 60% of you are already in a leadership role and are looking for how do I become a better leader, looking to improve or gain some tips and whatnot. About 22% are like, what can help me to advance into that leadership role? And others, maybe not on paper, not the leader, about another 20%, but want to lead from the current role. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. And I promise to have some of all of this in this presentation, and I hope you get value from it. Let me see. I think I just close it now. Technical difficulties, which is not a precursor for becoming CEO, unfortunately, or fortunately for me anyways. All right, so I'm going to jump ahead. All right, I'm going to start with that question about how do I become a leader? And it's a tricky one because anyone's advice, it's an N of one, and you really need to get lots of inputs on this. But I tried to do this almost like a meta-analysis, like looking at lots of research, experience, as well as what's written, what are research studies, and to kind of summarize down some of the key aspects of it. And I'm going to start with, it's a few assumptions. Just for those of you listening, I think because it's a BWF event, you realize that I'm going to talk about this from the context of nonprofit fundraising. So you might be looking at to become an executive director, maybe some of these things apply, but it's really nonprofit fundraising, which often might be called chief development officer, chief fundraising officer, chief advancement officer, maybe a vice president of development, or some AVP or an executive role on the advancement team that I think this would also apply to, like head of operations might be your top role if you're lean towards the operational side and so forth. So there's a few assumptions there. And there's also some observed industry biases, but I think it's important to talk about those biases because whether we like them or not, they're kind of a true thing. And it's the environment we're in. So recognizing what's the signal, what's the noise. And one thing in the terms of the bias is there's a real value on relational fundraising success. What I mean by that is major and principal gift fundraising. More so in the higher education and healthcare sectors than any other segment of nonprofit. But it's very rare to see the top fundraising officer not have some past success with closing gifts with high net worth donors. Now, some of that is from an organizational bias, but also part of it is from a donor bias that if I'm going to give my largest gift or what might be one of the largest gifts to your organization, whether that's $1 million, 10 million, or 100 million, depending on the size and scale of your nonprofit, I feel as a donor, I should talk to the boss or I should talk to the leader. And that bias makes it such where oftentimes a leader who's not comfortable with that might be less effective. So that bias is based in some reality that there is some expectation that this is a high net worth, someone who's comfortable with the high net worth. But there's also some unintended consequences of that. Like we've seen a higher level of transiency in job positions in, say, annual giving or regular giving, mass giving, because especially in the higher education healthcare sectors, less so in NGO sectors, which have largely had broader middle class outreach functions. But we've seen great annual giving professionals saying, oh, if I ever want to become the leader, I better build up my skills in major giving, and then they leave very soon. And with that higher turnover rate, we get a little bit less commitment to innovation that comes with time and experience. So there's unintended consequences. That's one, not to belabor that. Another bias is I've noticed a lot of search teams really love to see that you were ever a campaign director, that you're somehow in campaign leadership. It's often mentioned as a prerequisite. And by campaign, I mean comprehensive or capital campaign, not like a mailing campaign. But then there's been some leadership of a comprehensive, complex effort of a campaign. It's often listed as a prerequisite or it's unsaid as a prerequisite. Another bias is that institutional brand does carry weight. And you might be a mediocre performer at a brand that's very prestigious, like a very prestigious nonprofit, or you might be the top performer at I'd hate to say mediocre, but one that doesn't carry national or international prestige. And you might be more qualified, but that person at that brand might get more attention. There is a bias. I think those in fundraising realize that great brands of institutions doesn't necessarily mean they have the most complex, sophisticated fundraising programs, but it does catch attention. Oh, they were a fundraiser at, and you say the name. And the brand might be around their higher education experience, their nonprofit, their marketing and branding, and less so about the actual capability of the fundraising program. We also see subsector bias. Like if I want to hire someone to lead this arts organization, they need to have worked in the arts. This doesn't surprise anyone. We see overlap. The higher ed and healthcare often overlap because they work closely together, mainly because there's a lot of academic medicine connected to universities, or cross subsector if within a community. Like you might have been at a social services nonprofit, and that arts organization is in the same community. The community value might offset subsector bias. And we also see some regional bias within the United States, certainly from coasts for like East Coast, saying I don't want to hire someone from the Midwest, things like that. Not very explicit, but people have mentioned that before. You also see some that might benefit you, like I see in other countries, oftentimes wanting to hire a U.S. fundraiser because of the dollars raised in the U.S. are so much higher than the next country, that the U.S. must be better at it rather than you might be better at it. So sometimes that gets opportunities outside of the U.S. So there are some industry biases worth recognizing. But there's also universal biases. So not just in fundraising, but in whatever role you're looking to move into, when people hire leaders and executives, and I dug into so many studies on this, and these were kind of the areas that the most stuff was written about. Just kind of bear with me. The words might be different in different articles and so forth, but there was a lot of talk about likability being on par with capability. So that'd be a bias. I like this person. Might weigh as much as they're capable of this job. Be mindful of likability bias. Second is, while intelligence is valued, and we'd all think that intelligence would be the top thing, it's often caveated that intelligence is valued, but not at the expense of warmth. There's cliches of people are very intelligent, but not having the people skills. Those types of things were talked about often. As per what I started with, the Peter Principle concept, past production is often highly valued, even often more so than capabilities for the current role. That might be a bias that favors some that might not be fit for the role, but had good performance. That's more likely the case in internal promotions than in external hires into leadership roles. There's lots of articles that there's a lot of people, whether this is right or wrong, that they're biased about whether you look the part or dress the part. Do they seem like a fill in the blank? Unfortunately, that's often the case. Perhaps dressing the part makes some sense, but that's something there's a lot of articles written about. And then finally, industry reputation, which is one we might not think about in this space, but it actually does apply to us as well. That I've heard of so and so, or I heard them speak at this place, or they're so active on LinkedIn. There's sort of a reputation or a clout kind of concept. I have a good friend of mine who works at one of the major labels in Nashville, and I was asking him, so how do you guys decide like who the best bands are? Like what's that process? Like you're going to some nightclub and in Austin or wherever, Pittsburgh, and you hear this band, like that's a band we need to sign. He's like, oh, I wish it was that way. It was that way maybe a generation ago. But now, frankly, we're looking at how big their YouTube following is. And if they've already been able to amass this much of a following doing their thing, we can draft off of that and make them bigger. So they're actually valuing the size of their following even more so than their talent and ability. And I won't say which company because I might get him in trouble, but I thought that was a fascinating conversation. And the other thing is when you're actually interviewing for a leadership role, what are they thinking? And I dug into a lot of conversations around this spot. And and obviously they're looking for if you're the right candidate or not, but kind of the internal monologue is, do I actually like this person? Are they trustworthy? Meaning, do I think that what they're saying is true? And paired with the third bullet, do I believe we're going to see the results if this person is in this role? There's often some acknowledgement of novelty. Like, did they say something I've never heard before? Like all the other candidates, I want to listen. I'm going to be a collaborative leader. I'm going to raise big money and so forth. But this person said a thing that surprised me. That usually stands out. Do I think they'll stay? Have they been a job hopper? We've seen some of the best leaders have actually had very long tenures within between roles as opposed to jumping their way up. There's people who have hit the leadership role, but hit the role and stayed are often people that were patient on their career path. Do they actually have a plan for this role? Or do they have a basis for their plan? They did some homework, and based on what I hear, I think these might be some of the issues and what I would do to address them. That's often some of the internal monologue. There's certainly a lot more. And then a research study that came out was a big meta-analysis on personality traits, because people bring up personality traits. A lot of times when you hear about some of the personality mechanisms and tests, they're really wrought with a lot of false information. Some of them are just bad. There's a lot of people that would just tear apart like Myers-Briggs or even strength finders because of the relative versus normative value. Like they might be stronger at this in terms of their preference, but maybe their lowest things are still stronger than underperformers' top strength and whatnot. But they dug in, and the meta-analysis did find that there were 3 positive effects from personality that they saw did lead to promotion. One was openness to experience, to new experiences, to trying new things. So an openness. The second was extroversion. I know, I'm lean more introverted than extroverted myself, but it did have statistically measurable effects that extroversion were more likely to be promoted. And the third being conscientiousness. Now, these are the 3 that pass statistical muster in the meta-analysis that could be positively linked to promotion. Those with negative effects, there were 2. One was neuroticism, which maybe is not as much of a surprise, but what might be surprised is agreeableness. People that would agree with everything, that, yep, I agree, are kind of, what do they say, yes men or rubber stampers or whatever the expression is. Overly agreeable people were also less likely to be promoted. So maybe that's an interesting thing. So as we're on our way to being a leader, there's certain concepts of career management. Maybe here's some tips to think about. I hope that this is value and I'm not too simple, but kind of stick with me here and we'll get into some of the characteristics for the 60% of you and what makes a great leader once you're there. I'm nearly to that point. But one of the things that I would talk about is to really plot your journey. Take the effort and think about what is my ultimate goal. This might seem fundamental, but then try to imagine that you're in the hiring committee, hiring the role that is your ultimate goal. And think about, if I were to hire that position, what skills or qualifications, career progressions would I like to see? And then map that out. And then suddenly you have a map. I mean, if you need to fill in the gaps, talk to others on their journey. Like, how did you get there? What are the paths that you took? So you can see and be purposeful about those chess moves or those meaningful opportunities on my path to where I want to go. What is it that I need to learn, uh, achieve proven success in, expose to, practice, refine, kind of tweak things that I'm not good at. Um, Another thing is to align mission preferences. Now, it's very cliche to say just do what you're passionate about and then it'll never feel like working. But the reality is, we're in a profession where you actually can work with your passion. Like, at least from a nonprofit perspective, maybe you really care about education or the arts or social services and hunger and children, or just pick the thing, and you might be working in it already. But what we've seen in some of our data is the top predictor of fundraising performance is actually the authentic alignment of the fundraiser to that mission. Like when we've asked donors, do you think that fundraiser would give the same gift if they had your resources? They said yes about that person. Those are the people that they described were the top performers. And think about that. What are the problems that are the most worth solving to you that you can be passionate about those? If you choose that domain that you care about, doing more will not feel like work, and the meaning and the purpose will feel like a promotion right there. So really be thoughtful about that. I think there's so much diversity in nonprofits that you can find something that you care about and align to that. And you're more likely to succeed there, more likely to promote, more likely to have joy, and to have some of those characteristics, openness to experience, conscientiousness, and some of those areas that are make you more likely to be promoted, maybe even more extroverted. You love to talk about it. Secondly, is become a nerd about both your domain and in fundraising. I remember in my early years, I did a lot of work in data science, and my first work at BWF in the early years was setting up a lot of predictive science or initial data science programs. And because of that, I ended up speaking at a lot of universities. I spoke at MBA programs at business schools and so forth. They'd often have me like on the upcoming data science and business and so forth. And so I'd meet there with either masters of science and analytics or maybe MBAs that are leaning on the econometric route and so forth. And when I'd give these talks, invariably the people would come out up to me and be like, all right, what should I deep dive in? Should I do focus more on machine learning? Should I focus more on big data, different techniques? Is it really my R skills or my Python skills? Almost all technical questions, like what would set me apart? And what I pointed out to them is if you've got this degree and these credentials, like you've hit the qualifications for being a data scientist. If I'm hiring a data scientist, I'm maybe not as much looking for what are the technical specifics. What I'm more interested in is the domain knowledge. And what I mean by that is like think about where you want to apply those statistics skills is what I tell these grad schools. And let's say, I don't know, you want to work in healthcare administration or health records or something. Become a nerd about healthcare administration, healthcare records, so that when you're meeting, you can say, from my mind, there's 5 main questions that need to be solved in this area. And here's how we can go about solving them with data. That's going to pull you apart more than that technical knowledge. Similarly, knowing fundraising so well that you can define what the questions are, even more so than the solutions, that you know like what's happening, who's where, sort of think like the sports fan that knows like all the personnel moves. They like on draft day, they know who's likely to be drafted next. This person got traded there. They know everything on their fantasy league. They talk about it for fun with their friends. Or I have friends that are on the theater side. I'm kind of involved on theater a little bit. Now they'll know, oh, which shows are going to be coming out, the cast. Oh, this person's done in October, or they're coming back in November. I think that's Darren Chris actually with Maybe Happy Ending, or the cap tables, and etc. And they can talk about that because they're nerds about that. Find that domain you want to be involved in and become a nerd about that. And I mean that with love, being a nerd myself. What I really mean is learn continuously, deep dive in that area so that you're like the sports fan of fundraising. Secondly, or thirdly, fourthly, I think I'm on fourthly, engage in the marketplace. And what I mean by that is join the conversation. Now, it's more than just starting a blog. It's really all the stuff and whatever makes sense to you, like write, speak, jump on podcasts, create a TikTok. I don't know, whatever makes sense to you. Branch out a little bit out of your comfort zone, meet with people, ask from peers, be someone who asks the dumb questions so that you can identify the harder questions. Similar to that concept from my friend in Nashville, like the people that already have a following, they already know, and I'm like, oh, I was just talking to so and so about that very topic. They know a lot about this thing. You're kind of it's more than just networking. It's that you've become part of the narrative in the marketplace. I think that's one way to set yourself apart, and it's actually really fun. Um, it might not sound like it when I first started doing a lot of speaking in the early 2000s and so forth. I would sign up to speak on topics that I knew at least just a little bit about because I figured if I have to stand up, present, and take Q&A, I better learn a lot about it. And it caused me to actually learn more about a topic by agreeing to speak on the topic. So it was both learning as well as fun to engage in discussion and learn from people like this. Like, do I know all the answers? Definitely not. But my doing this session caused me to dig into so many more things, which are going to make me better as a leader just because I'm presenting it. And hopefully it gives value to you. Another thing is to stretch your job description. So this might be like it's fundamental that do really good at your job. Like you do your best. That doesn't mean perfect, but it means like you're executing, you've got the grit, you're doing your thing. But also do a new thing. Something outside of it, like offer to help with another area, even if it's outside your area. Develop something on your own time, on your own dime. I remember in the early days of the data science work, people were like, my organization just doesn't want to invest in analytics. I'm like, well, why does that stop you from developing yourself in analytics? You can still learn stuff. I mean, we used to pay universities to train us, As soon as we get a job, then we want them all to pay for all of our training. Sometimes it makes sense to develop something on your own to earn that investment or earn that right to be invested in. And innovation is not just technology. When I hear people talk about innovation, they jump right into new AI coding or AI things. But really think of it just as what's something we're doing right now that I could do a little bit better. If we just make something better, that's very innovative, and over time, getting into that mindset of making things a little bit better helps you to stretch that job description. And then ultimately back from that concept around authentic mission alignment is give yourself. I mean, it's really tough to be a fundraiser who doesn't give to the same charity. Like if you don't care enough to give to your own organization, like how does that feel asking someone else to give? Like, and I'm not saying at the same level, but would you give the same gift you're asking for if you had the resources? At least ask that question of yourself. And if not, why? Why would you not do that? And I think that walking the talk gives a level of authenticity that is really meaningful, and you can tell who really cares about pick your area, the environment deeply, so much so that they're working in it, they're fundraising in it. That person's likely to be a leader because of how they engage in that way. All right. So I talked about some ways on following the path from some of the biases to plotting your career journey, some of the steps you might do along that journey. So let's say you are the leader or you're in the chair, and the kind of the third answer to that poll question, how do I become more effective leader where I am? And some of this I'm pulling through. I wrote a book with my good friend Amy Lampy, colleague now at BWF, called Benefactors, and there's a chapter on leadership within that book, and some of it I'm pulling from that content that we worked on that book. And some of it's outside of that as well. But one of the things is leaders versus managers. I mean, both in some ways have a lot of similarities. The last three bullets, they should model the cultural expectations. They should care deeply about the people that work for them, care deeply about the organization they serve. But one of the difference between a leader and a manager is leaders really say where we're going. They set the vision and the direction for organization. Maybe that's in the short term. Maybe it's the long term. It's maybe if you're a coach, this is how we're going to win the Super Bowl. It might take us 3 seasons, but here's our pathway to get there. We're setting the vision and direction. And then secondly, they're providing guiding principles so other people can make decisions the way you would as a leader. Here's how I make decisions. These are the principles that govern that, so that then managers are able to take those principles and further convert that vision into action. They take, here's where we're going, set out by leader. How do we make this action and execute against these things? And so often managers provide decision-making frameworks or frameworks whereby we can meet mission, meet the vision through action uh, as leaders from our role. And some of those components within that. So what do these great leaders have? And I'm going to kind of move quickly through some of these characteristics. Vision is not just charting the course and shining the light on it. That's probably the most important thing. But where are we going? Where do we need to go? Such that when you're looking at building your team, you're building it around your mission, values, strategic plans, and benchmarks established that flowed out of this vision and strategic plan. It's really to align what people do to where we're going. Secondly, there's a concept of innovation that leaders can nudge the team more so than others. And what I often use as the deciding factor, and a lot of people have used this expression, so I'm hardly unique, but best practices versus next practices. Best practices are usually the framework for fundamentals, which is critical for a manager and for a leader to make sure the fundamentals are there. Like you can't innovate if you don't have the fundamentals. I like to say if you're learning to water ski, you're not going to go off some sick jumps if you can't first get up on 2 skis. So we need to get up on 2 skis before we can showboat a little bit. What are those next practices that advance our team, sector, and industry so that we can train and educate and cast vision for what not just where this organization can be, but what you as an individual, what this team can achieve? A third big characteristic that we outlined within the book is that responsibility. Leaders carry the weight of the position seriously. Now, carry the weight might seem negative, and it can feel that way. As a leader, leadership is often lonely, and it does feel like a heavy weight on our shoulders. But it's also something that's, it's a great honor and privilege to carry the hard stuff so other people don't have to necessarily. But there's a counter to that is great leaders help people to be more equipped to handle the hard stuff themselves. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but knowing when to stand up for themselves, for their team, within the organization, outside, wearing the title of confidence and reverence, knowing they're filling a chair, they are not the chair themselves. That's a big part of responsibility. And that's what leads us to humility. Think about the best leaders you've ever worked for. Usually they're the most humble leaders, the ones that are willing to say they don't know, the ones that will fail openly and guide you through when you fail openly. How do we fail well so that we learn from it? The ones that credit the team more than themselves. I was just meeting with a great leader last week who I could not get him to say a great thing about himself, only other people. And even like, oh, I don't know much about that. And I knew he knew everything about that. Um, and I don't think it was false modesty. I think it was true humility, that constantly learning, and is a servant leader, which is a constant fight as a leader to fight against pride, arrogance, or egotism, which diminish your effectiveness as a leader. And it's not an act. Like, how do we find our path to have that be real? But sometimes character habits are a way to develop character. Practice doing it that way. Eventually, it becomes the norm. Another areas that often comes up is work-life balance. And I think that's important. We see higher burnout rates in leadership than any other because of the weight they carry and other things. But I've often found that the balance is often related to purpose and meaning. And if you're doing something that you view as meaningful, important, like to what I was saying about in terms of your passion, it's not just like do what you're passionate about, you'll never have to work, but do you feel what you're doing is actually helping solve a big problem? Is it furthering the cause that I care about? Is my work meaningful to someone else's life, even one other person in my organization? That meaning and purpose can do a lot to offset some of the burnout. But that said, it's like, don't work the whole time in fundraising. Having a good home life, having a life, going seeing the show on the weekend, or watching football on Sunday. Don't check your laptop during those moments, because that's important. You are important. You want to take care of the leader just like you want to take care of the program, and especially if that's yourself. Now, from an advocacy perspective, great leaders are constantly advocating not just for their organization, but the whole profession, other people. That's why they get involved in CASE or AFP, why they get involved in APA or ADRP, whatever organizations are with, because we want this profession to be, I guess I said progression. See, I admit, gives me an opportunity to admit my mistake in the fundraising profession. Internally, for their organization and their teams, direct reports, for fair and equitable compensation, of course, and organizations within their cities and communities. Advocacy is what leaders do, and inspiration, empowering the teams towards greatness, their ultimate potential, exposing to new ideas constantly. I think that's some of the most fun about leaders, is as we've become a nerd, we've found all these things, we found what works, and then seeing that in people like, hey, you'd be really good at this thing. Let's talk about how together we can help you like go in this area. Um, and then you see them on the path. I'm almost done with this laundry list. There's just a couple more. Obviously, ethics standards. One of the challenges for a lot of leaders is when we're individual contributors, there's much more conversation with each other. Now, sometimes you're seeing things that's confidential. Obviously, maybe it's anonymous gifts, so certain things that maybe personnel changes that we want to be mindful of how and when those are communicated, and how are we knowing when information should or should not be communicated. Now, I'm not suggesting for opacity, but appropriate transparency and appropriate opacity when it makes sense for the benefit of the person, for the benefit of the organization. And then grit. Grit is often one that I think people focus too much on, but I also really like it. People with determined endurance to hit their goals, what often says is, "Oh, so I should be a workaholic to exceed." That's not what I would say. I mean, maybe if you read some of the Angela Duckworth, so forth, like you're putting all your hours into this, that might be effective. But I like more the perseverance. I'm persevering in this position. I keep hitting roadblocks, but I'm going to keep trying to fix it. I'm going to keep trying to achieve this next thing. We're going to hit goal. What's the one next thing I can do? And that commitment to endurance also might be patience with your own career path, with your organization, with your team, because those that persevere in positions are often the best leaders later. Okay, so I walk through some of the industry biases for becoming the leader, some of the career path. How do I become that leader? And then what are some of the characteristics that great leaders have? So I want to jump into them. What are the critical moves? Like, what are things I can do to become a better leader? Because those are qualities, but what are the things to do? And maybe these are overlapping a little bit. Now, I talked a little bit about being a student of the business, become the nerd. So I'm going to skip that one because that'll be redundant and dig into these other four a little bit before I move into some questions. The first is commit yourself to character, which is a strange thing. Like character is a thing that people have, right? And I do believe that character habits can be built. And I've been motivated very heavily by the late Fred Keel, who wrote the book Return on Character. I highly recommend this book. Also, take with a grain of salt, I did help with statistical analysis in support of this book, spent many years working with Fred. And this this book, which was really the first of its kind, that actually proved that being a good person is good for business. This was put out by Harvard Business Review Press, and really digging into the universal character traits across cultures. Almost every culture on the globe has a concept of forgiveness, forgiving yourselves, forgiving others, being compassionate about other people, having integrity, doing what you say you're going to do, and taking responsibility. And they measured people by observation, what their employees said about them, as well as self studies, and who they ranked as PhD psychologists as having these characteristics. And they measured them against business results and found the top half of people, based on character alone, controlling for all others, had up to 4 times the return on assets to their company's bottom line. The top quartile having 9 times the return. They found positive impact on workforce engagement, talent retention, and true performance. And the takeaway from this book is not that if you have it, great, good for you, but what are those habits where you can become a more forgiving person, become more compassionate, build up your integrity muscles, build up your responsibility muscles. So being committed to character, I think, is a solid walk. I talked about guiding principles for the vision. This is one you could dig into. I know Ray Dalio is often well known for the book Principles. Heath Brothers have talked about this quite often. The U.S. Navy had the keep it simple, stupid concept that we've often heard about in lots of business books and so forth. But the fundamental united feature of this is guiding principles. How can we communicate, here's how I make decisions as a leader, so that other people in the organization, when they have a tough question, and maybe it's not the toughest question that maybe should come to you, but it's a tough question, that they can answer it a way you would, so that you're equipping them. Kind of the old only do what only you can do. How can we equip them so that I'm not doing everything? I often tell people, managers tell you what to do, leaders remind you who you are. How do you remind someone that they have the agency to solve the problems, but a good starting point is guiding principles for how they would make decisions in a similar way. I think that's a fundamental thing to put together. From an innovation perspective, don't have to go out and learn how to code or be the best person at ChatGPT, but just be committed to continuous improvement. Those have gone through Lean or Six Sigma or the Toyota Kata and others. I like the Toyota Kata concept. First introduced me, I think Memorial Sloan Kettering was using this with their project management team. They invited me to go to Toyota Kata training with them. Loved it. But one of the simplest principles is just when you're working with an employee, just like, what's the target condition? Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Where am I at right now? What's the one thing I could do to get a little bit closer to that? All right, the next week. All right, you tried that one thing. What was the result of that? What will I do next? It's sort of continuous improvement. The other thing, and this was outlined in the Keel book as well as others, is the top predictor we found in that character research of innovation is actually forgiving work environments. If you feel that I'm going to get in so much trouble if I make this mistake, I'm not going to even try to do something new. But if I know that I've got some flexibility, that if I mess up, I'm going to be forgiven for that and get to try the next thing, I'm going to become more and more innovative. The highest ranking on the forgiveness curve also had the highest ranking innovative workforces. So are we a forgiving work environment, or are you so focused on your own fear that you're passing that on to your employees, a fear of messing up, as opposed to a fear of not letting them learn how to innovate and be more effective? Similar to the guiding principles, I'm a big fan of putting a rubric for innovation if you want to, like a decision-making rubrics. Also do it for your fundamentals for innovation. So here's like an innovation rubric, hardly rocket science, but maybe this is helpful. Like, all right, if we have this new idea, kind of go through this grid. Does it enhance an existing capability? Is this going to be more valuable to our donors? Would it benefit multiple areas? Is it going to lead to bigger, more sustained giving? Does it align with our guiding principles for our organization? Kind of benefits. And then risks. Could it actually adversely affect giving? Like, is there a risk to giving? Does it actually fit with our brand? It's really cool, but it doesn't fit us or the brand that we're trying to portray for our nonprofit. Is the cost higher than the benefit? Do we have a true ROI measurement that it's a net positive ROI? Or when is that ROI going to be positive so we can measure what the cost benefit of waiting till it's fully operational? Is there an unreasonable operational impact or unreasonable strain on the staff? The one I see most often skipped is, oh yeah, let's just hire 15 more fundraisers and then the same support mechanism. Obviously, that would strain them. But the same can be true for innovation. We do this cool new thing, but suddenly do we have people to run the cool new thing? So some of those risks, but having a rubric together. I would also say a critical move is to begin modeling excellence. So what you say matters, but what you do matters more. And this goes back to the character habits. If I feel like I need to move from fear, start acting like that. Say those things and start to exemplify that, and it starts to stick. But what you do is what the employees see even more than what you say. And they'll certainly notice from an integrity perspective if the orange and the blue box here don't line up. So the famous Emerson quote, one I often use, maybe to make myself not feel good, but like to remind myself of the weight and of my own role as a CEO, is Emerson said, "An institution is the lengthened shadow of one person." Now, it probably is more than that, but it's a good like a self-evaluation tool. What kind of shadow am I casting so that people are seeing? I remember the old Manager Tools podcast, which I used to listen to. It was one of the first podcasts I think I ever listened to, more than 20 years ago. But I remember them having an episode that saying, like, when you become the boss, it's like there's this giant neon sign over your head whenever you walk into a room, and it says the boss. And you got to know that that's how you're seen, whatever that leadership role is, and realize that, especially when you're trying to persuade, because what from the same outlet they talked a lot about business persuasion, and really there's only three ways to persuade someone to do what you want them to do. Um, Arguably more if we get into nudge theory, clearing the path, and other things like that. But I'm going to get into, for the sake of a PowerPoint, three good principles are really good, and it sounds like I'm smart. So usually it's role, expertise, and relationship. A role is like, I'm the boss, you work for me, I can exert my role and cause you to do something. You could say this is teacher to student, perhaps. So there's different roles we see in society. Maybe someone pulls us over speeding, I'm going to pay the ticket because of acknowledgement of a role in that moment, etc. A second would be expertise. I observe someone to know more about something than I do. Therefore, I'm going to do the thing because I think they're more expert. The doctor says, maybe you should try this diet plan because of this thing in your blood work. It's not an exertion of role, it's an acknowledgement of their expertise, which would persuade me to do that thing. Or even a small scale, I go to the library, like, where do I find this book? Like, oh, go over to aisle 3. Like, they're not forcing you to go to aisle 3. You're like, I acknowledge you have expertise on where this book is, therefore I do it. It's an expertise persuasion or an exertion. And the third one is a relationship exertion, which might be like, you ask your friend to help you move. Like, there's no role dynamic or power dynamic between you. I mean, unless your friend is an expert mover, it's probably not an expertise dynamic. It's just quid pro quo. I would do it for you, you would do it for me. I want to build a relationship with you that where we help each other and serve each other. The reality is when you become a leader, it's hard to exert outside of role or have people do things just because of your role. And there might be some acknowledgement of expertise. That depends on what if you're managing like high level knowledge employees, which I love the book Multipliers on that. If you've not read that book, it's really good if you manage really sophisticated technical people. Um, but you always have that opportunity to build a relationship, knowing that that role is always there. You can still exert relationship even within that role. It's very difficult to persuade that way, but that's why kind of walking the talk and modeling is so effective as a leader. Ultimately, the institution does reflect the personality. If you value compassion, you'll start to see your organization starts to value compassion. If you're driven by fear, the organization will respond in fear. Like some of the signs of a fear-based is there's a lot of CYA language. There's blame happening or gatekeepers. No one can ever move something forward unless this person signs off and that person signs off. That's usually evidence of that there's fear at the leadership level. And if you see that in your organization, maybe you do have the fear, but that might be a character habit to work on. How can I move that to forgiving and empowerment instead of fear? Where I enjoy kind of mistakes. Maybe I become the stoic and I'm all amor fati, love of faith. Like, oh, it's great we messed up here. I can learn from that. If you're going to model excellence, the program will also become excellent. The institution does reflect the leader. Now, what's often brought up when it comes to organizational culture from a leadership perspective is the Lencioni book, and it's certainly everywhere. And of course, those of you who have read it, the absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance, accountability, inattention to results are often the 5 dysfunctions where when those are solved, the teams are in harmony. And I think those, if nothing else, are really good places to start to become a better leader. But I kind of dug in and say, like, are those the same dysfunctions I see in strong leaders? In some ways, yes, these are the right things. But here's what I see more often when I work with a lot of leaders and where they could be better. I would say the absence of encouragement. And we can be better by offering positive encouragement to the team, choosing to do that, even if it's uncomfortable. Get practice at offering positive encouragement, like the Ariely study in the book Payoff they talked about, where that encouraging note from the leader and how much that improved performance. Fear of letting employees fail is really, I'd say, very tied to my bottom one, which is inattention to employee empowerment. It's very likely that no one in your organization is as skilled as or experienced as you. Maybe that's true. It might also not be true. But the only way they're going to get there is by making the mistakes. Like, think of if you're the top fundraiser in the room. Certainly, you're going to be the one closing the biggest major gift, but you probably could close the mid-level gifts better than anyone else on the team. But you can't afford to be closing every mid-level gift. We need other people that might have a lower close rate to you to excel in that segment. And then as they grow better, then that segment gets better. But your ROI is stronger with, say, the leadership level or inspiring other people to perform. But that fear of letting employees fail is a drain on your organization. The only way to improve that is to encourage making mistakes. Kind of the amor fati, or if you're biblical, the Romans, we rejoice in our sufferings, or whatever path you like to go on that. Lack of vision. Identify your the only way to solve that is to identify that destination. It's not raise more money. Like, our vision is to raise more money next year, or to stay open. Like, those are really important and those are probably missional, but why? Like, where is it that we're going? Is there a Super Bowl win in your future? Or if we look back and say, will really have hit our mission if these things happen. I think that's key. More importantly than just lack of vision is, even if you have a brilliant vision and no one knows about it, it's like not having a vision. So keeping it in the dark. Visions are not hope. I hope we do this. And if you're writing a vision statement, and which is, I think, a valuable thing to do, perhaps more importantly, is those periodic 3 to 5 year visions in conjunction with that vision. But everyone must see the vision, because you as a leader can't help but shine a light on it every day. And then that inattention to employee empowerment, leaders do put too much on their shoulders. Usually that's a fear and that's a leadership immaturity. Like, if this messes up, I know that I can jump in and I can save it and make it better. Is actually really poor for equipping your organization. And it's very easy to delegate tasks. It's very difficult to delegate decision making. Great leaders delegate decision making. They give strategically critical responsibilities and decision making to employees, and they equip them to do that. Now, when I have new leaders at BWF, and when I train people here, I always use this grid. So anyone from a BWF is probably groaning because they've seen me say this so many times. But I think this is really where my brain is as a leader. And I think about, for day to day, once questions come to your desk, they're usually the really hardest. They're the most difficult questions. They're the really hard questions, because if they're easy, they were solved. So when a question comes to you, there's a few choices. You can either say, here's what we should do and solve this, or you should push it back on the employee and say, what's your best thinking on this? Like, I often say, like, an employee shouldn't bring a decision. or I shouldn't bring a problem without a proposed solution. Here's this problem we have. I've dug into this and I looked at all these angles. Here's what I think makes the most sense to do. Like that's a good way to bring a problem to an executive is here's a problem. I've dug into it. Here's what I think is the best solution. I want your input on that. That's wonderful way to work with a leader. But now as a leader, I have the choice now. Am I going to like solve this problem or to push back on them? Like I like to kick the tires. Like, okay, why did you land there? What are the other things you dug into? What about this thing? And they're like, here's why I didn't think that thing. And then it's like, all right, we're going to go with your proposed path. My path, your path. And then the reality is, of those two choices, it either worked or it didn't work. Now, if I solved the problem and my solution worked really well, like great, we did this thing. What I've just done is reinforce dependence on me, this upper right corner. I come to my leader, they solve my problem. I always know I can bring my problems to my leader, as opposed to I can bring my proposed solutions to my leader. Now, let's say that said, all right, let's go with what I think. Here's what I think we should do. Let's do this thing. And it doesn't work. Suddenly that employee's like, hey, I brought it to you and what you suggested didn't work. There's a little air of resentment there. I might resent that, like maybe if we'd done it my way, it would have worked. But now I'm annoyed because now we got this problem because we did your solution. Now, let's say we push back and we go with the employee's path. What we're going to see as a result, if it works, is that they feel really empowered. I had a really hard problem. I was seeking advice, but I went with what I proposed that we do, and what I proposed to do worked. I'm a stronger employee. I'm a stronger leader. I'm on a leadership path because of that opportunity to go with my solution. Now, if we go with mine and it doesn't work, I'm actually going to learn from that, especially if constructively. The leader is like, what can we learn from this? Why didn't that work? Let's dig in. What maybe would have worked if we had done it a different way? That's real learning. And the reason I bring this up is for a lot of leaders who feel they need to make every decision, I remind them in what world is dependence and resentment more valuable to organization than empowerment and learning? I think if there's nothing else, embracing that fact that I want to equip others to be leaders makes you a better leader. It also makes the culture better and builds a better trusting environment, a more forgiving environment, helps you cast a positive shadow and models behaviors you'd like to see with your organization. So ultimately, where I'd want to end with and go to a question is to build the organization your mission and your donors deserve. Focus on being the leader your mission and your donors deserve, and your team and organization will follow your example. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you got something out of this. There's a few book recommendations. I do recommend the Return on Character book by Fred Keel I mentioned. I briefly mentioned Benefactors by Amy and myself. Grain of salt, yeah, feel free to buy my book or just ask me about it if you already have it. It's super cool of you. And the third one I mentioned was Multipliers by Liz Weissman, which I think on some of these final concepts on equipping problem solving within an organization is one of my favorite books. There's lots of other great books out there that I could go into and lots of great research. Hopefully you enjoyed it. But I think I have time for a couple questions if you want to drop in the Q&A. But what I also put on as a poll, we're not going to show the results of this poll, I believe. Oh, I think the first question came up again. Oh no, yes. Yeah, the question came up. This is for you to fill out. I'm not going to show the results of that, but I really appreciate you all being here. And I'm going to pop over to the Q&A if I can figure out how to do that. My Q&A is not actually showing on mine right now. All right. So here we go. I've got no open questions, which means I either bored you to tears, which I will hold out that that's a real possibility, or I was effective, maybe not, or you just wanted to see the content, which I certainly value. If you have any questions, I'll stay on for another couple minutes. Um, what's going on this Friday? Well, let's see what's going on for me. I'm going to homecoming at St. Croix Lutheran Academy. So if you happen to be in West St. Paul, the best high school football team there is going to be playing. So that's what's happening for me on Friday. Um, oh, I guess events, we answered that live. All right. I think if there's other questions, thank you for filling out the poll. I really appreciate all of you. I hope this was of value to you. Feel free to reach out. Um, uh, as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't know that I'm a great leader, but I'm in leadership a lot. So I thought I'd give you my voice, find other voices, learn from them, learn from leaders you aspire to be like. But if nothing else, just like find the zone where you feel that you can be effective and double down on that. If nothing, like for me, I just decided to go the nerd path and kind of worked me out. Like I might not be the best at fundraising, but I can know as much about fundraising as anyone possibly could know. And maybe that'll get me someplace. And that's worked for me. Maybe that's not the thing for you. Maybe it's just being deeply compassionate and being encouraging. Play towards your strengths and dig into those. And in the and maybe at some point we'll get to chat more about that and reach out to me. But with that, I think I'm going to thank you all for coming. And I think I have to jump into what's next. One thing I'm super proud of that if any of you are still on the line is at BWF, I've been really involved with the Generosity Commission, how to build the everyday donor back up because we've moved so much into this dynamic of the high net worth donor. And what we've seen is declining donor counts. I'm so proud that BWF actually is turning the tide on this. I think every place we've worked with, almost all of them, where we're seeing donor counts going back up. And you're going to get to hear a little bit about what that playbook is from Anshu and Zach, two of the most brilliant minds in annual giving today. You won't want to miss that. Thank you for being here for that. I'm Josh Birkholz. Here's a QR code and go be amazing. It was great to talk to you all. Love you all in this profession. Thanks for this opportunity. Bye-bye.